Alrighty, cherubs. Today we're going to talk Hellenistic Greek art. And the thing about the Hellenistics is this is how we're going to end our discussion about ancient Greece. We're going to come back to the Greeks when we talk the medieval period, but for the ancient Greeks, this is our last entry. Now, there's a lot to discuss, and what they're doing is great, and I'm super excited to talk about this with you. Okay, so the video links are on the next page for your convenience. Make sure that you take your quiz on the Etruscans also. Now, just as by way of review, I just want to go through these. And the one on the left is, let me get the laser pointer here. This guy is versus this temple, which is, okay. What order is this temple? What order is this temple? What order is this column? What order is this one? And which is this one? Okay. What order is this temple? What are these little pictures, this red square? What is that called? What's this purple? These three lines. What's the triangle up top called? What's just above the colonnade called? When you mix the sculptures, the sculpted elements with this, combine all of it, what's that called? Now this, what is this called, this object? I'm not talking about the order, I'm just talking about the object, versus this object. Again, I'm not talking about the order, but what is it? How do you know that that's what it is? We've never seen this sculpture before, but you can tell which era it belongs to, and you can tell me what kind of statue it is by his stance, by the negative space, by the smile. Okay? Where does he go? Now this guy, again, we've not seen this statue either, but you can tell me for the same things, you can tell me that which time period it belongs to because of what? What elements about him tell you where he belongs in art history? She, where does she belong? Notice the material that she's made out of. Okay? Notice what she looks like. Notice what she's got behind her and next to her. What are they doing structurally for this piece? Okay, so where does she go in the history of art? Where does she go? We've not seen a female nude before, but here she is. Now you can tell by her look. You can tell by her stance where she goes. And you can also tell that this is not an original statue, but a copy. And how do you know? Okay. Versus this statue, how do we know where she goes in the history of art? Okay? There's a little bit of review. Now, I want you to go into your notebooks and write this down for the rest of Greece, the rest of Greek art. What does it mean to be human? And that's our theme, or emotional reality. These are our themes about how we're going to view all of this art. Now, Hellenistic art happens like this. The Peloponnesian War happens. Remember that battle between Athens and Sparta, where they go head-to-head. Sparta wins, decimates the Athenians. Sparta wins, but they don't have the strength any longer from this long, protracted war to fight off outsiders. Enter the Macedonians just north of Greece, who look hungrily down upon their southern neighbors and say, aha, I'm going to come in and invade. And they do so under Philip of Macedon. He conquers Greece, and then it gets assassinated. His young son, his teenage son, takes over the kingdom, and his name is Alexander. as in the Great. And Alexander's like, people, we don't need to fight amongst ourselves. We've got bigger fish to fry. And by bigger fish, he meant the entire Persian Empire. So he's going to take war to the entire Persian Empire. He's going to take on the biggest empire on the earth and take them down. So what he does is he takes, as he spreads the empire, he also spreads Greek culture. Now, it's not going to stay purely Greek, because these people that he conquers are not Greek. But he spreads Greek culture, but it's going to mix with these local and change a little bit with these local groups. So in Egypt, it's going to be a little bit different than it's going to be in Assyria versus how it's going to be in Persia versus the rest of Mesopotamia versus Anatolia. So all around the now Greek-speaking world, it's going to change. Culture's just going to change just a little bit from place to place. They're all going to speak Greek now. They're all going to have this Greek style, but it's going to be a little bit different. And that's called Hellenistic, okay, or Greek-ish, Greek-like. Alrighty? They're going to focus on an emotional reality. They're going to take everything that they learned up through the Archaic and the Classical period, the ideal form, and they're going to make it now hit home, hit an emotional center. So we're going to move away from that to the other side of that spectrum where we had that thinking brain, this kind of cool intellectual art done to a formula that we had in the Classical period. And we're going to now move to an emotional reaction. The art's going to try to say like, I want you to feel something. Okay, and that's what's going to happen in the Hellenistic. Okay, now we're going to see portraiture, and they're going to start to create portraits of people and try to capture likenesses of humans. And the first is, we'll see here in just a second. Okay, but in the statues, they're also going to, and in paintings, they're going to try and capture different moods and different emotions, not just like a cool beauty, but a hot fire and passion. Okay, some vocab for you. And these are our 5 pieces that we're going to talk about today. We've got a city, a temple, a marble sculpture, a bronze sculpture, and a mosaic. Now here he is. Here's the man himself. Here's Alexander the Great. Okay, and you can see, and this is how they depict him time and again. You're going to see he's got this pronounced nose. He does have a large nose. He does have these deep, heavy-set eyes. And he's got these long, flowing, luscious locks like he's in a shampoo commercial. He's always depicted with this long, curly, flowy hair. All right? Here is his path through the Mediterranean world, through Mesopotamia, through Persia, Central Asia, into India, and it's in India that his troops are like, we're done. We want to come home. He's like, no, but adventure. We're conquering the world. And his troops are like, nope, we're done with this. So he says, fine, we'll go back. So they go back and they make it as far back as as Mesopotamia, where Alexander dies. A young man. He has no children. He has no one to inherit the empire. So what he does is, or what happens is, his generals kind of carve up what's left. They carve up and take for themselves different areas, and their families rule for generations as Greeks in these foreign lands. Okay, so that's when Hellenistic art happens. Now, our first piece is going to come to us from Italy, and we take a look at this, and it's called the Alexander Mosaic, and it's from the House of the Faun in Pompeii, and it's Roman. It's a Roman piece, but it's Greek. Okay, so we're going to zoom in on this. You can see it's much bigger. than that original picture. And what we've got here is a battle. Now just look at this for a second. I'm going to zoom in for you, but you can scroll around too on the PowerPoint down below. You look at what's happening, and we've seen several battles happen already in the history of art. We've seen the Narmer palette, we've seen the Standard of Ur, we've seen a bunch of different representations of war, and this one's a lot more visceral. It's a lot more real. We've got horses. People are moving and twisting in all directions. This isn't just a 2D flattened Standard of Ur kind of thing. This is a hot battle where horses are whinnying and running and look at the expression on the horses' faces. They're scared. They are terrified. This guy, this poor horsey, he's dead. Okay, you can see his feet have collapsed underneath him. This one is like rearing backwards and like trampling, as is this one. Okay. So what's getting shown here is the battle between Alexander, and you can tell it's Alexander. Nose, heavy-set eyes, long shampoo commercial hair. He doesn't wear a helmet because he's Alexander the Great, and he don't need no stinking helmet. Okay? This is a bit of propaganda, okay, that he can ride into battle and not be fully armed or armored because he doesn't need it. Okay, so there's a bit of propaganda happening. And now watch what he's doing. Alexander is on his horse, who's rearing back and trampling this figure right here, who Alexander is stabbing with his spear. But if you take a peek, look at his face. He's not even looking at the guy he's killing, nor is he looking at the guy who's next in line, him. He's only got eyes for one person, and that's Darius, the Persian king. Okay. I'm coming for you, and that's what he's saying. Okay. Now you look at the Persian soldiers, and they're like, they're terrified. You look at the Persian king, and he's terrified. And he's getting pulled away he's riding this chariot, and you can see his chariot is going so fast that we're not even getting spokes. It's just a blur of wheels and movement. And you can see his charioteer, he's like, run. And his charioteer is like, yes, sir. And they're getting them out of dodge as fast as they can. Now, in their haste, you can see the lines of the Persian spears are like, they're almost like motion lines, like, whew, he's going so fast, like a comic strip, like, whew, 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 whew. He's moving so quickly. Now, he's moving so fast that he doesn't even care that he's trampling his own troops under his wheels. Now, this guy right here is my favorite part of this whole picture, because here's the back of his head, and he's getting crushed by this wheel, and he was holding his spear, and then he turns and sees the king was in his chariot, and he's getting trampled by him, and he's holding his shield, and his shield is crushing him under the wheel. Now, this face here, this is a reflection of his own face in the bronze shield. Let me go to the next slide so you can see what that looks like. Okay, there he is. It's kind of hard to tell in the other image, but there he is, getting crushed by the wheels of his king's chariot. All right. Now, the Alexander Mosaic existed in, well, let's keep talking form here for just a second. Okay. Now, you can see here, think back to the Niobetes crater. Now, the Niobetes crater was just at the end of the Archaic period into the Classical period, and it was a red figure vase, and how they depicted people and how they showed transitions of things between clothing and body and different parts was, remember, it was all monochrome. It was all red figure with just these thin black lines. Check out this. What this is, you can see color modulation You can see highlights and shadows. You can tell the muscles in the neck and in the hooves of the horse, and you can see all of this detail, and the detail happens not by lines, but by color modulation. Okay? Now, this is not a painting. This is a mosaic, and a mosaic is a picture that's made out of little stones. And you put these little stones together, and they make a picture, and they're embedded in concrete. All right? And that's what's happening here. So this is a copy, it's a Roman copy in mosaic of a Greek wall painting. Whew. You can see the level of their sophistication, their understanding of depth. You can see, for example, that this horse right here, you can see clearly the foreshortening. Remember, foreshortening from the grave stele of Hegeso, that's when you've got a thing that's closer to you, like you can see in the cameras picking up my fist. My fist looks much bigger than my head, even though you know in your brain that my fist is not bigger than my head, but it sure looks like it because it's closer to you. That's foreshortening. And that's what we're getting here with the horse. That's what we're seeing in Horsey here, that his head is much smaller than his backside, and that is because the horse is facing, like he's facing away from us. We're facing his backside. Okay, and so we're getting that color modulation there too. This is such a sophisticated image. It's such an intense, dramatic image. And this is made out of little tiny rocks. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be brave? What does it mean to be horrified, to be terrified, and to run? That's what this is about. Okay? Now, go ahead and watch the Khan Academy video, and go ahead and watch this. It's like a 2-minute clip on mosaics. Now, it's going to show you glass. The Romans aren't going to use glass. They're going to use stone. And they'll show you that too. The Christians are going to use glass. The Romans are going to put their mosaics on the floor. They're meant to walk on. So this was in the House of the Faun on the floor in Pompeii, this replica of this Greek wall painting. And now this, you see it now, it exists on the wall because they cut it out of the floor and stuck it onto the wall so we can see it as art. But that's not how the Romans would have viewed it, okay? The Romans would have loved the image, loved Alexander the Great, but they would have put this on the floor to walk on. Okay. And here are our notes. So make sure you jot these down. Okay. Moving on, our next piece is in what is today Turkey, Anatolia. And it is a Hellenistic city in Pergamon. Now we can see here this temple. There's a couple things that hopefully you should notice. One, it's inside a building. That's what happens when imperialism happens. The Germans found this in Turkey, and dismantled it and thought it would look better in their museum in Berlin. So now this sits in Germany. They deconstructed it, brought it back to Germany, reconstructed it there, and it sits inside a museum. That's the altar of Zeus and Athena at Pergamon. Pergamon's the city, Hellenistic Greece. Now you can see that it is Ionic, but you can also see hopefully that it's different than the Temple of Athena Nike in a lot of important ways. So, for example, the Temple of Athena Nike was a classic Ionic temple. This one's different. The frieze up at the top of a classic Ionic temple is only going to be 2.5, 3 feet tall. This is enormous. Okay, this is larger than life size. And it's 400 feet long as it wraps around the back of the building. We've got this Ionic colonnade, but again, it's not just a rectangle, which was what a classical temple would have looked like. This has got arms. that reach out and wrap around you and bring you in and pull you in to the scene and pull you into the sanctuary, pull you into the sacred space. And this is kind of a hallmark of, you'll see this again when we get to the Baroque period after the Renaissance, and we're going to see that how they create buildings that reach in and pull you up and in. And you can see the frieze then, the figures are tumbling up the stairs that you're walking past. All right. Now the altar of Zeus and Athena at Pergamon, here's a model of it. So you walk up, it's got statues on the top. You can see a couple of the statues remain up top. You walk up the steps, and there's the sacred place where you make your offerings to Zeus. Okay? The temple complex was here, so it took up a big chunk of the city. It's as big as their arena, as their theater down here. So it takes up a big chunk of the city. Now you can see that the city is built into the mountainside. All right? And you've got classic style buildings, but then this. And you can see that here's the main road that connects the temple complex to the city, and you approach the back. So you can so you can walk around to the front and see the whole frieze. And then walk up the steps. Okay. Now the scene that's depicted is called a gigantomachy. So I should have made a slide for this. We've got a couple levels of Greek deities. Okay. There is the oldest two gods. There is the earth, Gaia, and then there's the sky, Uranus. Female, male. The earth and the sky fall in love, and they have children. The Titans. The Titans overthrow their father, Uranus, because he is a terrible person, deity. He's awful. He imprisons them. So they overthrow him and murder him. So he's gone. So the Titans now are in charge, and the Titans do the same thing to their kids. Their kids are the Olympians, and their kids overthrow them because they are swallowed by the main Titan, Kronos. They get swallowed by him. They eventually get freed. They fight the Titans and win. Okay. Now, and they become rulers of the universe, but there's still Gaia sitting up here. And Gaia falls and it begins a relationship with, okay, now remember, we talked about this before, the three-tiered universe, underworld, mortal world, divine world. The underworld is not like our conception of hell, okay? It's just, everyone goes there, good, bad, you just go. But there is a place in the Greek underworld, the pit, the abyss, and that's called Tartarus. And Tartarus is that is a place of suffering. Okay. And that's where, and it's black, it's dark. And that is where the Titans are locked away, is in Tartarus. Well, Tartarus is also a being, not just a place, the physical manifestation of this realm. That's who Gaia hooks up with next, is Tartarus. The union of the earth and essentially hell produce giants, monsters. The Olympians then battle, so they fought the Titans, now they battle the giants, the children of Gaia and Tartarus, and take them down. Okay? And that's the story that's being told on this frieze. It's the gigantomachy, the battle of the Olympians against the giants. Okay? When they fight the Titans, that's called a titanomachy. When they fight the Amazons, that's called an amazonomachy. When they fight the giants, gigantomachy. Okay? This is, again, kind of some bragging. It's a flex. They're showing off. We beat the Persians. It's not really about the giants at all. It's about beating the Persians. And they're very proud of this fact. And they bring this up again and again and again in their art. Okay? So in this moment, AP wants us to take a look at this scene from that frieze on the altar of Zeus. So this is Athena. And she's grabbing one of the giants. And you can tell he's one of the giants because he's got animal parts. Here's some snaky parts and here's some wings. And you can tell, so he's the bad guy. Agent of Chaos. She's grabbing him by the hair. And it's not just like a gentle like tug. She's like gripping. Let me go to the next slide so you can see it better. She's like gripping, like ripping his hair out. And his look is like pain, horror. He knows that he's going to be defeated because in her other arm, she's got her Captain America shield, and she's going to Captain America him to death. This is the giant Alcyoneus. Now, this figure down here is Gaia, and that's why she's rising out of the earth. That's why we only get half of her, because it's Gaia. She's the earth, and we've only got her eyes. And I feel like since the beginning of COVID, we've all gotten good at reading eye emotions, because we're all wearing masks these days. So we've all gotten pretty good at reading the eye emotions. And here we can see from her eyes terror. And sadness. Pleads, as she pleads, the rest of her face is missing, but she pleads and she tugs on Athena, please don't kill my son. But we know that she's going to Captain America him with this shield. This figure with wings is Nike, and she flies in and places the laurel crown on Athena's head. Okay? So that's what's happening here. Now look at it formally. Look at the form. We've got all these diagonal lines which make it dramatic. It makes it so dramatic. And that's the point. That's what they're trying to do here. And that's Hellenistic art, is they make it dramatic. They make it highly emotional. They make it really over the top. So it gets you in the heart and you're like, oh, I feel it. Okay, now also another marker of emotional art is that, especially when it's a relief sculpture, it's almost three-dimensional. Look how deep those shadows are. Look how this is it is still a relief sculpture, but it is virtually round. It's that high. I mean, you can fit your hand up and in here. You can fit your hand up here. You can fit your hand around Athena's head. This is high relief. Okay? So that is the temple of Zeus, the altar of Zeus and Athena at Pergamon. All right? Now our next piece, now this is not the next piece in your book. In your book, it's going to be on it starts at 152. It's 152, I believe, 153, 154. I've split it into 3 pages there. You just have to take notes on the one page. Just pick one of the 3, and that's fine. AP wants you to see these 3 images, so we'll take a look. It's piece 181. And it's the city Petra. Okay? Now, if we check out the name or the culture, it's Nabatean, with influences from the Ptolemies of Egypt and the Romans. All right, so these are not Greeks that are making this city. These are Nabateans. The Nabateans are going to be a semi-nomadic tribe that wanders the desert, but they're going to build this city out in the desert here. And they're going to travel through these canyons and find this spot and build this city. Now, the name Petra relates to the Greek word Petros, which means rock. And they name it essentially that because they cut this city from the canyon walls. And this looks just like southern Utah. And it poses the problem that southern Utah does too. We don't have any great metropoli down there because there's no water. Same thing here. They're not going to have enough water to found a great society there. So they're going to do what other people do and what we did in Las Vegas and divert water and create irrigation and canals, and to create this oasis here in the desert so that it becomes a city of 30,000 people, quite a large ancient city. So here we've got the tombs. I mean, they want us to see that they are these rock-cut sections to the city that they channel into the living rock and build the city right there in the mountain face, which is really, really remarkable. Now, this is the second image, and it's called the treasury, Al-Khazneh. It's the treasury. And if you may have seen this before, and the place you've probably, if you've seen it before, you've seen it in Indiana Jones. So in the third Indiana Jones movie, he comes and they film here in Jordan at Petra, and they use this as the location for the Holy Grail, where Indiana Jones finds the Holy Grail. There's no Holy Grail here, okay? But you can see how it is Greek-ish. Okay, you can see that it's got Corinthian capitals. Gasp! Corinthian capitals are only for sacred buildings. This is called the treasury. So, okay. Remember, it's Greek-ish. They're not going to stick to all the rules that the classical Greeks are going to lay out. They like the look and they steal it. So we've got these Corinthian capitals. We've got a pediment. We've got a broken pediment on the second story, and a tholos, a round temple sitting within that broken pediment. All right. Now we've got also up top here, it's a Corinthian capital. Now it's called the treasury because it was assumed to hold the treasure of the Nabatean kings, and because it's so cool. And also, this Corinthian capital up top was assumed to also hold gold. And so people are going to try and scramble up these rocks for hundreds of years, and eventually they're going to be shooting at it to try and topple it over, but because they think there's gold inside, but there's nothing in there because it's just solid rock, because it's been carved from the living rock. Another difference, so we've got this broken pediment. The Greeks wouldn't have done that, the classical Greeks. They've got this tholos and mixed it. They wouldn't have done that. We've got Corinthian columns. They wouldn't have done that either outside. And you can see that the columns are not equally spaced. Okay? We've got a spatial difference here. Now, this is what it looks like in the inside. And again, it looks very southern Utah. It's this red and pink sandstone. It's not this on the inside. There's no knights. There's no Holy Grail in there. Okay? There's another view. Again, you travel through this canyon to get to this site. The Nabateans are going to build this trading empire. They sit at these crossroads, and Petra is going to be their city, and it's going to be receive people from this very cosmopolitan city that receives people from all over the Mediterranean world and beyond. So you're going to find art depicting Greek deities, Egyptian deities, Assyrian stuff, like all kinds of, it's going to be this giant melting pot of cultures here, right? There's the treasury again at night. Now we've got this is called the Great Temple. We don't actually know what the Great Temple is used for. Oh, P.S. We think that this was a tomb. We don't know what the Great Temple, if it was a temple or if it was an administrative center, we're not sure. Much of Petra has been looted, so we don't really know a lot about kind of what they were doing and where they were doing it. Okay? So you can see the floor plan of the Great Temple was quite large. And again, you can see from that complex as well, we've got elephants popping out of those capitals. So we've got a lot of stuff happening here to show their wealth, to show their influence. Petra is going to decline in the Roman period. The Romans are going to see these people and be like, trade empire, on the border of our own, yeah, we want that. And they're going to gobble them up. And eventually they're going to divert the trade route. So Petra dries up and it doesn't have a reason to exist anymore. And that's why it's a ruin today. Go ahead and watch this clip then about Petra. Here's the city. Okay. And our next piece is the Nike of Samothrace. This is Winged Victory. And if you take a look at her, you can see that she is, you may have seen her before. She has no arms, she has no head. And those have disappeared through the years. It was found on the island of Samothrace. Okay. And it's housed in the Louvre in Paris. She's got a gown on, but then she also has this wrap, which is billowing out behind her. And to create this in stone is remarkable. And she's got these beautiful, beautiful wings. And look at the deep, deep cuts. And you can see her navel. Look at her stomach, okay? So we move this, look at their stomach, and you can see here the folds of her gown, but then you can also quite clearly see her navel. What's happening here is that she's wet, and they're depicting her wet. And the reason why she's wet is because she was placed on the prow of this stone boat, and it was in a fountain, and she was constantly being sprayed. She was actually physically wet. And they sculpted her to look that way. So they're, again, masters of their craft. Winged Victory, we know, would have been holding a laurel wreath, a crown, and probably a horn to signal victory. And I imagine that her head, and you look at her back is straight, and I imagine her wings are out, and I imagine that her arms were like out, and her head thrown back, and I imagine that she's just, again, we don't know. So this is just me speculating, but I think that she had her mouth open in a triumphant scream of yes! Victory. Not a calm, cool, collected Athena. No, she was triumphant. She lands on this Greek boat to usher in the victory over the Persians. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to do something that you didn't think you could do? When you've beaten the odds, when you've tried so hard and you won. That's what this piece is about. And during World War II, when the Nazis came, and the French knew that the Nazis were sacking all the museums, and all of these treasures that they've amassed, the treasures of Western civilization. And they knew that if the Nazis got their hands on their collection of art in the Louvre, that chances are they would never see it again. So they hid it. They gutted the Louvre. They emptied it and hid the pieces across France and some beyond. And they lifted this statue 7 feet tall. They lifted this statue, and she stands at the top of the grand staircase. And they lifted her so gently, so carefully. And they carried her down the steps to whisk her away. And if you've ever carried a couch up or down steps, you know that that is not an easy task. And can you imagine a multi-ton statue that is this large and one of the most important pieces found in Western civilization? And they're thinking about that as they're carrying her and stepping so gingerly as they're going down the steps. And as they move down each step with each movement, her wings flutter, her stone wings shake with the movement. And she's so fragile. And they get her out, and she's saved. And I got to see her, and it was one of the highlights of my life to witness this moment and to see her and to share in that triumph, to share in that victory. It's a beautiful moment. Our last piece is the spiritual opposite of the Nike of Samothrace. And this is the seated boxer. Now, the seated boxer is bronze to her marble, male to her female. Defeated to her victory. And we see him, and he's got these lips of copper, and his back is hunched and sags under his ample muscles. It's a boxer. You can see the wrappings, the leather wrappings on his hands. He's got cauliflower ear. That's what happens when you take too many hits to your head, and the cartilage in your ear breaks down and kind of becomes like puffy, and it looks like cauliflower. It's called cauliflower. And he has that, and you can see the cuts on his ears, and they're still bleeding copper blood. And his eyes are missing, but they would have been rock crystal to glimmer and show you the dewy wetness of his tears. And you can see that his nose has been broken several times. And you can still see the puffiness on his cheek from being punched. And he's an old man. And he's not getting up again. And you're young. But have you ever seen a dream die? Have you ever tried so hard for something and not see it come to fruition? What does it mean to be human? Sometimes it means that we win and we face our demons. And sometimes it means that we lose. And that's what this sculpture is about. Now you can tell his toes are worn. Seated boxer was not placed on display out in the public. He was placed on display below, backstage at an arena. Not a gladiatorial arena, an athletic arena where you'd compete. And his athletes would go past him before they walked out into the field. They would touch his toes for luck. Not today. Today I'm not going to be you, they would say. And you can see the expression here on his face of just defeat. You can see the cuts, and you can see his rumpled brow, and you can see his bleeding ears and the wrappings. Here, you see his ears? And it's just defeat. Go ahead and watch this on bronze cast, and you want to know how that happens. But that's what this is all about. And that's what the Hellenistics are doing. They're making pieces about emotional reality. What does it mean to take all of our human ingenuity and make something where no one else wants to go, to beat back the desert? That's what Petra's about. What does it mean to brag about your victory? What does it mean to show courage? What does it mean to show terror? What does it mean to win? What does it mean to lose? And there's more. Hellenistic sculpture is incredible, and it's varied, and it's wonderful. Take a chance and take the opportunity sometime and just Google and see what you can find, and it's remarkable stuff. And that's our lecture for today, and I hope that you've learned something, and I hope you've had a good experience today with Hellenistic art. These are the pieces we'll have a quiz on next time.